Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Sorry for the change of plans. Just have a little bit of a fever and didn't want to get anybody sick. So just going to be doing Daf Yomi from home tonight. Today we're starting on toward the bottom of Daf Tes Zayin Amud Aleph, and we're about 2/3 of the way down. The last word on the line that we're looking at is Dichsiv, and 4 words in, it reads as follows: Dorash Rava, and we're going to still be talking about Eov for much of the day today, and then we'll expand into other agaritas, and that will bring us all the way, Mir Hashem, to the end of the parak on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. And then on Shabbos, I will not be in the neighborhood, and David Merzel will be spearheading Daf Yomi on Shabbos. So the Gemara starts 2/3 of the way down at Dorash Rava and says as follows: Dorash Rava. My dichsiv, what did the pasuk mean in Sefer Eov when it says Birchas Oved Alai Tavo, the blessings of the one that is lost will be on me, and Velev Almana Arnin, and the heart of a widow I will have joy. So the Gemara darshans as follows: Birchas Oved Alai Tavo. What does it mean when the pasuk says that the blessing of the lost one will be upon me? Melamed Shahya Gozel Sadam Yisomim. He would overtake a field that belonged to a yasom. Umashbicha, and he would improve the field, make sure that it's growing nicely, water it, fertilize it, etc. And then umachzira lahem. So he was doing a Maseches. That's pshat in the pasuk when it says birchas oved alai tavo, and the pasuk continues v'lev almona arnin. What does that mean? That he will be joyous with the heart of an almana. If ever there was a woman who was an almana, she was widowed and she has yet to be married, and she was having a hard time remarrying. So what he would do is have a azil and shadi shmei lava. He would connect his name with hers. He would say that they were connected to one another, maybe that they were family. Have asu nispela, and then it was more likely for someone to marry this almana. The pasuk says also in Sefer Eov. We'll just read it inside so that we're reading it correctly. Lu shakol yishakel kasi. That if everything that has happened to me, says Eov, was put on a scale, it would not weigh out in a normal way. And this is referring actually to sand, that he would be, his tsaros were more than the sand of the earth. So the Gemara says, Omar Rav says, Afra lepume de Eov, we should put sand in his mouth. Havrusa klape shmaya, you're talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu like he's your friend. He's not your friend, he's the Eibishter. So when you say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, look, the way you're treating me, what you put on the right side of the scale with my tzaros is just overwhelming. That's not a nice way to talk to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And similarly, the next pasuk reads, Lo yesh beinenu mochiach yashes yado al shenenu. So here it's saying this idea that perhaps we should put a mochiach beinenu, we should put someone between us in order to help navigate things between me and you. Eov says to Hashem, obviously not a respectful tone. And Omer of Amarav, Afra lepume de Eov. Here too, he should put food into it. He should put the dirt into his mouth. Why is that true? So, just 1 second, please. So the reason why that's true, says the Gemara, is because let's just find the place back inside Amar Rava. Sorry, one line earlier. Yeah, the Gemara says, Amar of Afra lepume de Eov. You're speaking in a way that's really not normal. You shouldn't be talking that way. That you seem to be giving some negative feedback to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's just not allowed. The next pasuk says, about 3/4 of the way down in the middle of the line, we had a covenant between me and you, and I didn't even have any thoughts about a basula, about another woman at all. It says the Gemara, Amar Rava, here too, Afra lepume de Eov. There needs to be, says the Gemara, there needs to be dirt put in your mouth, Eov. That's not the right way to talk. But in this case, not because you're being chutzpahdik to Hashem, but because you're not on the level of Avram Avinu. Ihu ba'acharnisa. Eov was saying about himself that he didn't look at a basula, at another woman. But Avram afilu b'didei lo istakil. Avram hadn't even, really looked at his wife in that way. And how do we know that? He didn't realize what exactly was her level of beauty because he didn't look at her in that way. The pasuk then says, Kala anan v'yelech, just like a cloud will go and disappear. Ken yorecha o lo yale. The same thing is true for a person who goes down, namely a person who dies. If they don't come back up, that's kfira. That's pashut kfira. The Gemara says, Amar Rava, mikan shekafar Eov v'tchias hamesim. what we can see from here is that he was kofer in Tchias HaMesim because he said that a person who dies will not come back. The Gemara then continues, Asher b'sa'ara yeshufeni, in this storm you will stir me up, v'harbe pitzei chinam, and a lot of my wounds were for nothing. Amar Rabba, Iyov b'sa'ara charef. Iyov was blasphemous in regards to the word storm. Uv'sa'ara heshivuhu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu responded with the word storm. What does the Gemara say? B'sa'ara cheref, what was his language? Where he was mecharef HaKadosh Baruch Hu, D'chsiv Asher b'sa'ara yeshufeni, you put me in a storm, and that storm was very bad for me. And Amar Lefana, what did he say? Ribono Shalom, Shema Ruach Sa'ara Avra Lefanecha. It's very hard to say these words actually. Maybe, says Eov to Hashem, maybe there was a storm blocking your eyes. And perhaps you mistook me for the difference between Eov, my name, and an Oyev, which is an enemy. So therefore, maybe I'm being mistreated accordingly. And Besara Heshivu, how did HaKadosh Baruch Hu respond? HaKadosh Baruch Hu responded by saying, he responded from the storm, saying by Yomer, that you should gird yourself. Difficult things are going to happen. So says the Gemara. Amar Lo, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says back to him, Harbe nimin barasi ba'adam. I've created many, many hairs on the human being. And every hair grows out of its own pore. Each hair has their own carefully crafted hole from which the hair comes from, the follicle. And says the Gemara, because we wouldn't want it to be that the body would have two hairs growing out of one pore. If that were to be the case, the two hairs were coming out of one pore, it would cause for a certain level of blindness. And the Gemara says, if bein guma leguma lo nischalifli, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that between one pore and another, there's tens of thousands of hairs on a person's body. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu made no mistakes between the hairs, bein Iyov la'oyev nischalifli, do you really think that I'll make a mistake with your name and I misdirected the consequences? No, they were not meant for the Oyev in this case. They were meant for Iyov. They were meant for you. The Gemara continues 8 or 9 lines from the bottom on Tes Zayin Amid Aleph. Mi palag l'shetef ta'aleh. This pasuk is talking about who opened a channel for flooding. Let's see what this says. Harbe tipin, says the Gemara, barasi be'avim. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I created so many millions, billions, and trillions of droplets of water in the clouds. V'chol tipa utipa barasi la defus bifnei atzma. And every droplet of rain, all of them, they fall specifically in their own channel. The water doesn't come down like large globs of rain. Each piece of rain, each droplet of rain, come down individually. We wouldn't want to have, it would be dangerous if we had two droplets combined into one. That would be too big. And what would happen? Had it been the case that there was so many massive droplets, if it wasn't one droplet per droplet, but it was 2 or 3, the droplets would be so big that when they'd land, they damage the agriculture. The peiros, and it would ruin the ground and nothing would grow. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu digs again to Eov, and he says, Bein tipa letipa lo nischalifli. I didn't make any errors when it came to the droplets of water that are coming out of the sky. Bein Eov la'oyev nischalifli. Do you really think that I'm going to make a mistake between Eov and Oyev? Absolutely, I will not. And says the Gemara, how do we know from the pasuk that we just read? The pasuk mi palag l'shetef ta'aleh, my mashma dehai ta'aleh lishna d'tfusi. How do we know that the word tala is a language of tfus or channel, meaning the course that the raindrop falls? That's what the Gemara says, that there's a pasuk, and this pasuk can be found in Sefer Malachim, and there was some kind of moat that was built around a particular building, and it was referred to as a taleh, which is some kind of groove in the ground where the water was collected, and therefore, says the Gemara, that's how we know that ta'ala means a space that's specific for water, a channel. And then the pasuk says, "V'derech lechaziz kolod." So when it came to the sounds of thunder, each sound had their own channel as well. So the Gemara says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says back to Eov, "Harbe kolos barasi ba'avim." I created a lot of sounds up in the clouds, thunder. V'chol kol v'kol barasi lo shvil b'fnei atzmo, and every sound had its own pathway. And says the Gemara, "Kadesh lo yuhu shtei kolos yotzos mishvil echad." We couldn't even tolerate 2 sounds happening at the same exact time. Had it been that two thunders occurred at the same exact moment in the same exact place, it would destroy the world. It would have been too loud. And here too, HaKadosh Baruch Hu pushes back on Eov yet again. With the sounds of thunder, they were never repetitive by me. Do you really think that I'm going to make such a mistake like that, where I'm going to have shtei kol? No, of course not. And I also didn't mess up between Eov and Oyev. So that was a long-winded answer that Eov tried to say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had a sa'ara, he had a storm in front of him, and therefore he made a mistake between Eov and Oyev. The Gemara gives 3-4 examples as to why that's not the case. And to the bottom of the page, another shtickle musar from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Eov. The Gemara says on the bottom line, this is a pasuk in Eov as well. Hayodata es ledes ya'ale sola cholel ayalos tishmor. Do you know when the gazelles give birth? Ya'alezu, this gazelle, achzaris albana, is very cruel when she gives birth. B'shah shekoras laledes, turning to the top of Tezayin base. That when the animal crouches to give birth, Ola l'rosh hahar, the animal gives birth at the top of a mountain, kadesha yipol mimenu b'yamos, so that the new child that she's about to bear is going to die. Va'ani, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, mazmin lanesher shemekablo b'chnafa, and he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that he prepares an eagle to catch the gazelle that's being born. Umanicheu lefaneha, and then the eagle brings the child of the gazelle back to the gazelle. We're on Daf Tezayin Amud Beis, 3 lines down, and says the Gemara that with this system of the gazelle giving birth and the need to have the eagle catch the animal in just the right time, it says the Gemara, so then the baby of the gazelle would die. So therefore, we see yet another exacting sampling of a Kadosh Baruch Hu running the world. And for the 4th time, ben regalo nischalefli. If I don't make mistakes when it comes to timing, ben Eov la'oyev nischalefli. You think that I'm going to make a mistake between the words Eov and Oyev? I didn't make a mistake. Kadosh Baruch Hu's on a roll. Here's another one. Balal ayalos tishmor. The ayal, the rams are going to be protected. Ayala zum rach matzar. The rechem, the cervix of the animal is very, very tsar. It's very tight and difficult for the animal of its size to be born through that type of canal. Says the Gemara that b'shah shekoras laledes, when the ayala, when the female ram is about to have a baby, when she's crouching to give birth, animazmin la darkon, there's a particular type of animal, seemingly a snake of sorts, shemashicha beveisa rechem, which will bite the mother in the place where the rechem is, where the cervix is, in order to soften up the muscles, and that helps the animal's body to relax in order to give birth, is being bitten by a snake. And had it been that this bite of this animal to soften the muscles of the cervix, if it wasn't the case that it was so exacting, then the animal would have died. Again, Eov, you're off base. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't make mistakes, and he certainly doesn't make a mistake between the word Eov and Oyev. That sounds like when you're editing a paper, it's between the words form and from, the 2-letter switch. It's unacceptable to type that in an email, to hand it in a paper. Pasha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, P, Aleph, 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 whatever it is. It's impossible that Hashem would make such an error. The Gemara says that the pasuk says in Eov, and we're about 10 lines down on Tezayin Amud Beis, Eov lo bedasya daber dvarav lo behaskel. He didn't know what he was saying, and nothing he said was logical. Skip the parentheses. Omarova. A person doesn't get halachically, hashkafically caught up in the words they say when they're b'shas tzar. There's a little bit of a reprieve where the things that you say during those moments are not held against you. The pasuk says, "Vayishmu shloshes re'e Eov es kol hara zos haboilav," that the 3 friends of Eov, 3 of his close friends, that they heard what was going on with him, and vayavo ish mekomo, and all 3 of them on their own, they didn't have cell phones. All 3 of them on their own ended up coming to the city. And who were these people? Elifaz HaTeimani, Bildad HaShuchi, B'tzofer HaNa'amasi, and Vayivadu Yachtav Lavo Lanudlo Ulanachamo. And they traveled together, which again is very different. How did they travel together? Again, how did they meet up at the right place? So that's what the Gemara wants to find out. My Vayivadu Yachtav, how did they end up meeting in advance of getting to Eov's house? That's what the Gemara wants to know. So we're a third of the way down, 5 lines before the very wide lines on Tezayin Amud Beis. heading to the end of the parak today. Amar Yehuda Marab, everyone ended up, all three of these friends, ended up walking through the gates of Eov's city at the same exact time. Vitana, and we have a brisa. Bein kol echad ve'echad shalosh meos parse. These people lived far apart from one another. They didn't live anywhere near each other, hundreds of miles apart. So Ki'ilu, one of them lived in Kansas, one of them lived in, I don't know, pick your three states. It's just not normal to time yourself so perfectly, but they did. They managed to be in the same place at the same time. So asks the Gemara, how did they know what was going on, that they should travel? It says the Gemara, they had some type of crown of some kind, and there was like an inlay of a picture of each person or an indicator about each person. And when they saw that one of them wasn't looking good, they knew something was wrong with that person. There was a tree that was representative of each friend in each of their gardens. When they saw that Eov's tree was withering, that's what the word is, kamush, it means that, dechamshe, then they knew to show up. So that's what they did. That's what good friends do. Amar Rava, hainu de amre inshi. This is what people say about having good friends. O chabra kechabre de Eov, o misusa. You either have friends that are like the friends of Eov, who are super committed and are ready to travel hundreds of miles at the drop of a hat, or you have misusa, or you have death. So just a beautiful idea about friendship. We will still be talking about Eov, but a little bit more anecdotally and through a different lens. The first of the long lines on Tez Zayin Amud Beis quotes a pasuk, "Vahi kechel ha'adam lerov al pnei ha'adama, uvanos yivaladu lahem." This is a pasuk from Bereshis, and the pasuk says that was when they were having children larov. Rabbi Yochanan Amar that they were having girls. That's what the pasuk says. Uvanos yivaladu lahem. What does it mean larov? Revia ba'al olam, those who are able to be roven, namely women who carry children, they're the ones who are brought into the world. That's what the word la rov in the pasuk means, is revia, that they're the people who are able to carry more people into the world. Rish Lakish Amar meriva ba'al olam, no, that when women come into the world, there's more fighting, there's more meriva. Amar la Rish Lakish la Rabbi Yochanan. Rish Lakish, who holds that it's all about meriva, and that it's not like Rabbi Yochanan said, that it's a good thing, that it's about to be revia ba'al olam. L'didcha, Rabbi Reish Lakish says to Rabbi Yochanan, that women are positive to be brought into the world because they bring the capacity for more children. We know from the story of Eov that after the whole tkuf of all the challenges, everything he was given back was doubled. His sons were doubled from 7 to 14, but his daughters were not doubled. His daughters were kept at the number 3. So 7 boys went to 14, 3 girls stayed at 3 girls. The Gemara says, Amar lo, you're right that the women did not double in the number of people. However, his daughters were twice as beautiful as they were before. Shiv'ana, which is a very unique word. And the word Shiv'ana over here actually represents 2 sets of 7. Shiv'ana banim, which is 14 boys, v'shalosh banos. One of the girls' names was Yemima. The second one whose name was Ktsiya. Keren Hafuch, the inverted Keren, the inverted horn. What do all these names mean? The Gemara says halfway down on Tez Zayin Amud Beis, Yemima Shaisa Dom Liyom. She had a brightness to her that was similar to the sunlight, similar to the day. Ktsiya, what does this mean? Shahaya Reicha Nodev Ktsiya, which was one of the ingredients in the Ketores. She had a radiant smell to her, a beautiful scent, which was similar to that of the Ktsiya. And Keren Hafuch, what does this mean, the inverted horn? The daughter who was called the Keren Hafuch. Amre de Be'Rav Shila, Shadoma Lakarna de Karesh. She was similar to the horn of a Karesh, which was the horn of a particular animal. The Gemara says, Karna de Karesh Lakusahi. That's an insult. That's not a compliment. It can't be that what you meant is that Keren Hafuch is this particular horn. That's an insult. Ella must be something else. Amar B'chizam, Kikorkama de Rishka Bemine. She had the smell of a luxurious type of saffron that gave her, again, this luxurious smell. The Gemara continues. Reb Shimon Berebi, Yisilidole Barata. Reb Shimon, who was the son of Rebbe had a granddaughter, and his son Reb Shimon had the daughter. And when he had the daughter, he was a little bit upset about the fact that he had a daughter. So says the Gemara, Amar le avuha Revia bala olam. His father said, Rebbe said, don't worry. Revia bala olam, you brought someone into the world who could bring other people into the world. It's a beautiful thing. So Amar le Bar Kapara says to the son of Rebbe, he says, Tanchumen shel hevel nichamcha avuch. Your father is giving you empty words of comfort. The Tanya, we have a brisa. Yefshar la'olam below zcharim u'velo nekevos, ela ashrei lemisha banav zecharim, and oilo lemisha banav zekevos. You're right. The world needs two people to procreate, but it's better to have boys than it is to have girls. We'll soon see this is a machlokas tanoim, but that was the starting point. That's what Bar Kapara held. Yefshar la'olam below bosim u'velo bursi. You're right. We need people who work in spices and we need people who work in tanning leather, but one smells much better than the other. Just ashrei mishum naso busmi. It's better for a person to work in spices and oil mishum naso borsi. And using this as a mashal to say that there's something negative about bringing girls into the world. Not that they don't have a function, they of course do, but that boys are better to bring into the world. That's what the Gemara says over here. Kitanoi. So then the Gemara says 2/3 of the way down. This is actually a machloket tanoim about whether or not bringing a boy into the world is better than bringing a girl into the world, or whether or not they're equals. Kitanoi. Ve'Hashem beirachas Abraham bakol, that Kadosh Baruch Hu gave a bracha that gave a bracha to Abraham with that he was blessed with bakol. What does that mean? He was blessed with bakol. So my bakol. Rabbi Meir Omer Shelo Haisalo Bas. The bracha was that he didn't have a daughter. Rabbi Huda was the exact opposite. Rabbi Huda said Omer Shelo Haisalo Bas, that Taka he did have a daughter. That is what the Gemara says. So we see a clear machlokas tanaim between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Huda as to whether or not it's a geshmak for there to be a girl or not to be a girl. Machlokas tanaim. Acherim Omrim Bas Haisalo LaAvram uBakol Shema. When the pasuk says Vashem Beirachas Avram Bakol, he was blessed with a daughter named Bakol. So Pasha, that according to this, she said it's good to have girls. Rabbi Lazar Hamodai Omer Istagninus Haisa Belibo Shal Avram Avinu. Avram had a deep understanding of the stars, of the constellations. Shekol Malchei Mizrach Umarav Mashkim in the Pischo. Everyone would come talk to him, and that was what it meant that he was blessed with Bakol. Reb Shem Ben Yochai Omer Evan Tova Haisa Tzalid Tzavar Shal Avram Avinu. He had a stone that he carried on his neck. Shekol Chole Haroa Samiyad Misrape. And anyone who was sick who saw this jewel that was being worn by Avram around his neck would be healed. When he died, Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Galgal Chama, Kadosh Baruch Hu took this, and what he did is he hung it in the orbit of the sun. Well, it's very difficult for us to understand now. We don't have the same model of understanding because the sun doesn't orbit. Things orbit the sun, but the sun doesn't orbit. So, okay, we'll have to figure that out with modern science. And Amar Abaye, when the day comes out, that's when people's illnesses also improve. So says the Gemara. What does it mean that Hashem was berachas Avram bakol? It means that in the lifetime of Abraham, that Esav did not do anything terrible. That really Kadosh Baruch Hu made a nace that Yishmael did tshuva b'yamav in his lifetime. So let's look at each of these Marimakomos. Shalom marad Esav b'yamav minolam. How do we know that Esav did not rebel in the times of Abraham? The pasuk says, "Vayavo Esav minasadav huayeh." That's what the pasuk says, that Esav came from the field and he was tired. Vitana, and we have a brisa that speaks about what Esav did that day to make him so tired. Also hayom niftar Avram Avinu, v'asa Yaakov Avinu tavshel shel adashim Menachem es Yitzchak Aviv. That was the day when Avram died. It was the day that Yaakov made lentils, Menachem es Yitzchak Aviv, because Yitzchak was in Avelus, so he made a food of Avelus, which was lentils. Why did they make lentils for Avelus? Ma'ishno shel adashim, Omar Amrei ben Arava Mishmei de Rabba Bar Mari. There was a statement that coming out of Eretz Yisrael in the name of Rabba Bar Mari. Ma adasha zu en lo peh. A lentil is a round item and it doesn't have any lines in it, and it's pretty spherical and clean with no mouth. Af avel ein lo peh. The same is true with an avel, that he doesn't have a mouth, that he doesn't have a peh. And we know this lahalacha, that we don't, they're really not supposed to be doing a lot of talking. We know that during the Yud Beis Chodesh, that a person is not supposed to say Shalom Aleichem to someone who's in Avelus v'chubei. Davar acher, ma'adash azu megolgelet, af Avelus megalgelet, u'machzeres al boi ha'olam. Just like a lentil is spherical and constantly rolls, so too that is the way of the world. That people nebuch die. It's just the way things are. It's the way the world turns, and people go back to earth. My beinai, what are the difference between these two approaches? The nafkamina would be about giving an egg for comfort. An egg, on the one hand, doesn't have a peh because it's seamless, but it's not a regular circle. It's an oblong shape. It's an oval shape. So that may be a difference between the two shittas. Amar Rav Yochanan, Chamesh Averos Avar Osa Rasha Osa Hayom. On that day that Abraham died and Esav came back, and it was the day of the lentils. On that day, the Esav did 5 tremendous averos on that day. The Gemara says, Baal na ramu rasa. He slept with a woman who was engaged to another man. And he killed someone. The kafar beikar, and he rebelled against Hashem. The kafar b'tchias hamesim, he denied that there would be a resuscitation of the dead. The shatis habechora, and he completely was mevaza the bechora when he gave it away so quickly for a bowl of soup. And how do we know each of these things are true? 10 lines from the bottom of Tezayin Amid Beis. Because when you put the two psukim together, there's a link between the two. One is talking about he came from the field, referring to Esau. One is talking about kibasada mitzah, and this is a pasuk from Sefer Dvarim, which was talking about a na'aramu rasa. So we see a link. How do we know that haragas nefesh, that he killed someone? So it says the Gemara, li ki efa nafshi lahorgim. So we see a link between the word ayef and efa and the word horgim. The kafar beikar, how do we know that he turned down a Kodesh Baruch Hu? Lama zeli, ze keli vanveu. Lama ze li. Esav said, why do I need ze? And what ze was he referring to? He was referring to the pasuk of ze keli vanveu. This referring to Hashem. So that's kafar beikar. How do we know that bekafar betchias hamesim dechsiv hine anochi holech lamus? Because he said, I'm going to die. Big news. And he thought that was going to be the end. He'd rather live than die. Pasha, we'd all rather live than die. But by Tchias HaMesim, if you believe in Tchias HaMesim, so then it could be worse, right? If a person dies, there's Tchias HaMesim. It's not the end of who we are. It's the end of our physical selves in this world. But there's a guarantee from Tanakh, from the Torah, from Chazal, that this isn't the end. But seemingly when he says, if he says, that this is the end, so obviously it's covered by Tchias HaMesim. 6, 7 lines from the bottom. First word on the line, B'shatis HaBechora. How do we know that he was Mevazah the Bechora? D'chsiv, Ayivez Esav HaBechora, black on white. All of this was one approach. But B'she'aseh Yishmael Tshuva B'yama Minalan. How do we know that Yishmael did Tshuva in the times of Avraham Avinu? Says the Gemara, Ki Hada Ravina B'Rav Chama Barbuzi. Abu Yasvei Kama de Rava V'Kamanam named Rava. They were sitting in front of Rava. So this is already in the times of the Amoraim. And Rava was kind of nodding off. And the Gemara says, Amarle Ravina the Rav Chama Barbuzi, Vadai de Amrisu Kol Misa Sheyesh Ba Gvia Zoi Misason Shal Tzadikim. Isn't it true that when the Torah uses the word Gvia, Gimel Vav Ayin, by a person's death, that it is a death of the righteous? So Amarle In, he said, yes, in fact, that's true. So then he throws back a kasha, Hador Hamabel. How can you say that? The Dor Hamabel also has the word Gava, but we said over there in Parashas Nachvatim Aleha Aretz Chamas. Amarle Anan Gvia Ve'asifa Kamrinan. When do we say that it's the death of tzaddikim? When there's two words, the language of Givia and the language of Asifa, then we know that it's the case. It says the Gemara, V'hishmal d'chsiv be'gvia ve'asifa. By Yishmael, it says Givia ve'asifa. Oh, so we see that perhaps he seems to be a pretty firm guy. The Gemara says, Adahachi itar behu Rava. Right then, Rava piped up. He woke up from nodding off. Amar lehu dardik, he said, you're little children. He did tshuva during his father's lifetime. Where do we see this? Look at the order of the children. We see Yishmael was second and not first. And therefore, that shows a little bit of deference that was given to Yitzchak, because why would Yitzchak get to go first? So the Gemara suggests, well, Vidilma, maybe the reason Yitzchak went first is Vidilma derech chachmasan kachashiv lahu. So it says the Gemara, perhaps we did it that way because of the wisdom. The Gemara says, no, elamei ata vikbru also Esav Yaakov banav. There we see Esav is before Yaakov, and Yaakov was a bigger chacham than Esav was. So the Gemara says, my time alo chashiv derech chachmasan. It can't be that you're saying that you're correct about the Yitzchak and Yishmael presentation, because on the Esav and Yaakov presentation, it wasn't in the order of chachma. The Gemara says, "El mida akteme adbure adbure, umida adbure shmami not tshuva avad b'yamav." By virtue of the fact that we see that Yitzchak was before Yishmael, that shows us that there is a deference from Yishmael to Yitzchak, and that shows us that he did tshuva, shema v'na tshuva avad b'yamav, and that is a raya for that aspect of the Gemara. Moving on to some other agadatas as we get toward the end of the parak. The Gemara says on the very bottom line of Tez Zayin Amud Beis, sorry, Tanu Rabbanan, there were three people who got a taste in this world of what it means to be a part of the next world. Top of Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, Elohein Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov, Avram dichsiv be Bakol, Yitzchak dichsiv be Mikol, and Yaakov dichsiv be Kol. So from this Gemara, we have Bakol Mikol, Kol from our benching. Three people had no Yetzer Hara, meaning they kabashed it, they killed it. That they were able to be in total control of the Yetzer Hara. David had no Yetzer Hara. But that means that there's a machlokas tanoim about David. According to the first approach, he was not included. It was only Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. And according to the second approach, he was. So be'idach, according to the Shita that holds that David wasn't included, what did David mean when he said v'libi halal b'kirbi? So he said, "Sorry, who the kamidkar?" He was just saying how difficult things were for him, but he wasn't saying that he had no Yetzer Hara. Tanu Rabbanon, another brisa, another agadata. Shisha lo shalat ben malach hamavis. 6 people couldn't be controlled by the malach hamavis. Zag the Gemara ve'elohein Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov Moshe v'Miriam. These are the 6. Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov. We know by them that malach hamavis wasn't shalat on them. D'chsibuhu bakol mikol kol. Moshe Aaron v'Miriam d'chsibuhu al pi Hashem. Those 3 died al pi Hashem. The Gemara says that's not true. The Gemara says v'Miriam lo ksiba al pi Hashem. By Miriam's death, it doesn't say al pi Hashem. So how can you say that by Moshe Aaron and Miriam it's al pi Hashem? It's only Moshe Aaron. Amar Blazer Miriam nami ben Neshika Mesa. Miriam also died with the Neshika Hashem. She died in that way. To Asya Shem Shemi Moshe, because of Gzeir Shava, we know that that's true. Why don't we say that Miriam died al pi Hashem? Says the Gemara, Shegnai Hadavar Lomar Pasnisht. It's not right to say that Hashem kissed Miriam in that way. It has a slight innuendo that we didn't like, so therefore it wasn't the case. Next, I got it to a third of the way down, heading to the end of the parak Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. The Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, Shiva lo shalat behen rima b'soleah. There were 7 people for whom, when they died, worms and maggots did not consume their bodies. Ve'elohein Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov, Moshe Aaron v'Miriam, u'Binyamin ben Yaakov. These are the 7. Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov d'chsiv behu bakol mikol kol. Moshe Aaron v'Miriam d'chsiv al pi Hashem. Binyamin ben Yaakov d'chsiv v'Binyamin amar yedid Hashem yishkon levetach alav. That he would dwell with betach, meaning in his grave, he would be protected. Yesh omrim af David. Some say there was an 8th person for whom the Rima B'Soleah did not affect them. That would be David. Tichsiv af Pesari yishkon levetach, where David said about himself that his flesh would be also protected. Ve'idach. What about the first opinion that said that there were only 7 people and not 8, that it was everyone but not David? So says the Gemara that when David said af Pesari yishkon levetach, rachmehu dekavoy, that was a tefillah. That wasn't a conclusion. That was an aspiration. Last brisa, I think. Yeah, last sugya for the end of the parak. Tanu Rabbanon, Arba Mesa be'itav shal nachash. There were 4 people who died be'itav shal nachash. What does the word be'itav shal nachash mean? So let's look at Rashi. 6-7 lines before the end of the parak, about a third of the way down in the Rashi's Dibur Hamaschel be'itav shal nachash. Ba'atzaso shal nachash. Just because of the fact that the nachash had given advice in our history. Klomar. Lo hay re'uyin lamus. None of these people deserve to die. Elishenigzera gzeras misa al kol toldosav shel adam harishon ba'atzaso shel nachash. Meaning, it's the curse on humanity that people have to die because of the atzas hanachash. These people didn't deserve to die, but because of the old sin of Adam Harishon, they therefore deserve to die. That's what the Gemara says back inside of Arba Mesu be'ito shel nachash. Ve'eluhein Binyamin ben Yaakov, Amram avi Moshe, Yishai avi David, Kaleb ben David. B'kulu, in all cases, Gemara, all of them we have a tradition about them. Levarma Yishai avi David, that Yishai, the father of David, the Mefarish Kra. There we have an explicit pasuk that speaks about it. How so? Dichsiv, the pasuk says, this pasuk can be found in Sefer Shmuel. Ves Amasa Sam Avshalom Tachas Yoav al Hatzava. Avshalom put Amasa into the role of the head of the army. Amasa ben Ish, he was the son of a man who Shmo Yisra Yisraeli. Amasa's father was Yisra Yisraeli. Asher Bo'el Abigail Bas Nachash, and he was married to Abigail, and Abigail's father was Bas Nachash. Achos Teruya im Yoav. V'chi bas Nachashi, v'halo bas Yishai. No, this Abigail was the daughter of Yoav. We know that that's the case, that Abigail's father was Yishai. We see here too that it was the reason they called Yishai as the Nachash is because he died because of the eights of the Nachash, but not because his name was actually Nachash. His name was Yishai. So that's how we know that Yishai was expressly included in the pasuk. That brings us, Baruch Hashem, to the end of the first parak of Maseches Bava Basra. Will be done in about 5 or 6 months. A little bit of a ways to go. Hadran Allah Hashutvin Baruch Hashem. Mazel Tov for finishing the parak. Yiratzim, we should come back to this daf in 7.5 years. Wishing you all a beautiful night and a beautiful Shabbos. This coming Shabbos, David Merzel will be leading Daf Yomi. I will be out of the neighborhood, and I'm anyways a little bit under the weather, so I probably wouldn't make it. But wishing you all a beautiful night.